So my name is Dallin Maybee. I'm Northern Arapaho, enrolled Northern Arapaho on my mom's side, and then also Seneca from Western New York on my dad's side. I grew up on his territory, Cattaraugus Indian Reservation, but kind of migrated out west for undergrad school and graduate work. I got an undergraduate degree in philosophy and American Indian Studies, and then I did some master's work at UCLA, and then I got a Juris Doctorate from Arizona State University in Federal Indian Law. Thanks in large part to Dr. Wiggins, who was buying art all during law school, and I'm proud to be part of his collection. I got started in art as a kid. You know, you grow up around all these objects, these utilitarian objects that are just beautifully embellished and decorated, and I went to our social dances. We have a longhouse religion on my dad's side, but we also do a bit of social dancing, and there's outfits and horn rattles and turtle rattles that you make and use and for some of our ceremonies and stuff. But I also knew I wanted to powwow dance. I'd seen powwows as a kid. My mom went to school at Brigham Young University. She was a single mom putting herself through school with 3 little boys, and we'd go to the powwows and watch, and I always just wished I could do that, right? But I saw the beadwork and the feather work and all the design elements, and I just knew that it was something I wanted to be a part of. So I started this sort of long process, this long learning curve of how to work with leather and feathers and start some beadwork. And that's sort of what I'm primarily known for today, is beadwork. The ledger art came a little bit later. I was a big fan of comic books. I tried to collect comic books. We didn't have a lot of money back then, so I found myself buying a lot of comics now that I could not afford as a kid. It's a good hobby. But it exposed me to these incredible narratives in graphic novels and comic art of heroes, protagonists, and antagonists, and villains, and I started drawing just to try and replicate what I was seeing in those pages. And so, as time went on, I continued to dance. I did a little bit of undergraduate work, and then I started to get more opportunities to travel. So I toured with American Indian Dance Theater all over the world. I toured with a couple other groups. Spirit the Seventh Fire was a Peter Buffett production. He's Warren Buffett's son. He's a musician. He did some of the music for Dances with Wolves and things like that. But at some point, as the tours started to dry up, I was like, I wonder if I could do something more. Let's see if I can go back to school. So I went back to school, and here I am. In the meantime, I continued to do art, and I discovered, thanks to my younger brother, who was an avid collector of Southwest pottery and rugs and now jewelry, he was like, "Hey, you got to go check out this thing called Santa Fe Indian Market." I was like, "What the heck is Santa Fe Indian Market? I've never even been to Santa Fe." He was like, "Well, it's like a fair, so you walk around, but there's all these artists from different tribes, and I think you could sell some of your work there." It's like, oh, okay. So I went, and it just blew my mind. It was a lot like Cherokee Art Market. You see a diverse group of artists from all across the country, different tribes, just producing phenomenal art in all mediums: sculpture, jewelry, beadwork, traditional art forms like diverse arts. And I knew I wanted to be a part of it, so I started doing that show. I started to realize that there was a bit of a market for ledger art. It kind of had seen some contemporary iterations, really starting again in the probably 50s, 60s, 70s, and now there's a handful of prolific Plains narrative artists from many different tribes. But let me step back a minute and kind of talk about, I know we're going to talk about contemporary Plains art, and I know that medallion doesn't have anything to really do with contemporary Plains narrative art, but it is still narrative art, just in a beadwork form. So a lot of people often ask me, well, what is ledger art? and it's got a long history as a medium. It's a pictorial narrative style that was traditionally done on bison robes, buckskin shirts, teepee lodge covers, things like that. And it was really just a commentary on the events and experiences of the day. You saw battle scenes, hunting scenes, a lot of ceremony scenes. You saw the sacred, you saw visions, but it was often a way to identify the wearer or the person who owned the lodge, and it recounted deeds, oftentimes, experiences that they had lived. It was, in a way, their contemporary Plains narrative, right? And so, as time went on, there was assimilative and very destructive efforts to essentially destroy our people, to displace us from our traditional homelands. The bison were actively targeted, and you've probably all seen the pictures of stacks and stacks and stacks of bison skulls, where these buffalo hunters would get on the trains and just run amok through our territories, destroying the bison as they went. And the thought was, you destroy the buffalo and you destroy their way of life. And they weren't entirely wrong. So during the Indian Wars, for example, a lot of those particular resources were now decimated. There was other Plains warriors who were taken prisoners of war and placed in places like Fort Marion, Florida, as prisoners of war. And but there was still this tourist interest in native art collecting, and so I think I heard somewhere that even Geronimo was making bows. Sitting Bull was touring with Buffalo Bill's show. There was these artists who were prisoners of war still creating art, but they were doing it on ledgers, right? The historical paper of their time. And so it became known as ledger art. They were using crayons and colored pencils and still telling those contemporary stories. So you started to see trains, you saw natives wearing uniforms and marching in formation because they were still telling the story of their times. And so that's essentially what ledger art is. Oh, no, I'm waiting for the fire alarm now. They're like, or is that the big hook? Is that the hook? You guys are trying to get me on stage. So, as I saw that art form, I realized that, I could tell my own stories through this medium, this art form. I was doing it through beadwork, but I knew that I could tell more contemporary stories through some of this ledger art. And so, this particular robe, I titled it Conductors of Our Own Destiny. And so that middle section with the train and the two medallions, it kind of illustrates the kind of the tension between our traditional ways and our contemporary ways, right? And I apologize, you can't see it a little more closely, but there's actually a native guy in a bonnet driving that train. I had a professor in law school who wanted to teach a class just on the impact of the railroad industry on not only American legal history, but corporate law, on state sovereignty, tribal sovereignty, all these different things that the railroad, for good and bad, did to the country. And so that kind of sprung this idea that, yes, we've lived through some difficult times and it's impacted our cultural identity, but we are fortunate to live in a time where we can decide as tribal sovereigns what our future looks like for ourselves, for our kids, for those next generations, despite all these things that have happened. So this particular piece was acquired by the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., and it's actually on display now. If you get a chance, there's an exhibit called Unbound, Plains Narrative Art, or Narrative Art of the Plains. And it's a phenomenal exhibit. They've got historical pieces, a lot of, man, it's amazing. There's like buffalo robes from Chief Washakie and Rain in the Face and some other pretty heavy hitters. And then there's my humble little piece. It's like amazing to be part of that. They've got a lot of historical ledgers. They've actually got full books that are intact, and then you can digitally scroll through the pages to look through the stories that these warrior artists were telling. And there's probably 12 or 15 contemporary ledger artists with 3 or 4 or 5 pieces included in the exhibit. There's dresses, some of the muslin dresses that made an appearance in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It's such an incredible display of what Plains narrative art really is. And there's lots of commentary that's way better than my explanations. So if you get a chance to go to DC, go check it out. I think it's up for another 6 months or something like that. So this particular piece, a lot of people ask me about the designs at the legs and the head. They're kind of stylized, but they're bison hooves. They represent bison tracks, which kind of takes on a lot of different meanings. I wanted kind of a classic buffalo robe look, but I wanted it to be contemporary because I'm not relegated to that time. I'm a contemporary Native person making my way through the world. So I have some of those. I still have some of those motorcycles. I had one of those cars until recently, but it represents my love of travel. I travel extensively for work and kind of as just a hobby. I'm probably a little nomadic that way. The scene on the top is a community scene. It represents that sense of belonging that we get from our cultural identity. I'm always telling my kids, hey, look, you just by way of who you are, you already have community. As soon as you tell somebody you're Arapaho or you're Seneca or you're Menominee and Ho-Chunk, your people will embrace you. They'll accept you, and that's such a beautiful thing to be a part of. So a lot of those lodges represent family members. My brother's Arapaho name is Rising Buffalo. Mine in Arapaho, or in English, means thunder sound comes down, or a thunder being is coming this way. Old Man Owl is up there, my older brother. That lodge that's upside down is we're a Sundance culture, and a lot of our religion talks about the blessings that we get from the sun, and that place that we were at before this one. We still call ourselves a sky people. And that upside down lodge just kind of represents how we came from that place to this one for a little while, but how we'll return to that place. I'm trying to think if there's those medallions. I use a very similar symbol on a lot of our stuff. It represents, it's beadwork, it represents Whirlwind Woman. When Man Above created this world, it was a little small for how many people were going to come here. So she used her powers to make this world big enough for all the different races of people that would be here. And I think it's an incredible story because it recognizes the power of woman, the strength that she has, and the blessings that we get from that power. This is another kind of train pieces. I was doing a few of these back then. You see the upside down teepee. That bonnet figure on that teepee represents authority and power, honors Buffalo Nation. I actually have a piece in my booth right now. You should check it out. It's a buffalo horn buffalo bonnet, albeit pretty contemporary compared to some of the ones you might see traditionally. And there's a little hidden surprise. If you who saw that clip of that Yellowstone buffalo getting a hold of that woman who got a little too close and kind of took her pants right off, and it had that pair of pants hanging on his buffalo horn, right? It's you got to go by my booth and check it out because there's a little homage to that particular guy. Storm elements, but there's also dove elements in that smoke from the bison, or the smoke from the railroad there behind that bison. This is kind of more of a classic piece, just very traditional in some of the designs. The horse tracks on the side, there's dragonflies. we painted some of these designs on our horses because of the medicine. We call it medicine. It's like a spiritual power that we get from certain things and designs, and so you paint them on your horse because you want your horse to be agile and not stumble and go for holes, and be quick and nimble when you need it to be. You see a lot of storm elements. The rider is interesting because it's kind of a post-reservation. He's got some, he's got a vest and a cotton shirt, but he's still got his traditional bonnet and leggings and stuff. And I like juxtaposing a lot of those elements just to show and remind people that we still are a contemporary, evolving, breathing culture. These are some more pop culture, whimsical pieces that I've done in the past. For both, I grew up reading Where the Wild Things Were. I love that story. My kids love that story. They love SpongeBob. And I think that's part of the appeal of these particular types of pieces, because we love these stories as children because we can insert ourselves into those stories. We were all Max, right? Or we had that imagination, we had that sort of mischievousness, I think, at some point, or we knew, or our own kids were Max. SpongeBob he's he's kind of got the silliest wisdom you'll ever see, but I look at SpongeBob, and some of our cultures and societies literally have clown figures or contrary people that show you exactly how not to act when you're out and about in public. And so I like to include some of that stuff because there is a wisdom there. And so for that particular SpongeBob piece, I took that world beyond just the paper into the frame because I wanted people to realize that our imagination shouldn't have confines and boundaries, that it really can permeate our whole life if we allow it to. So these are pretty fun little pieces. You might start to recognize some of the symbols that I use pretty consistently just because that's part of my cultural identity. Here's a couple hand drums. You see a lot of drums having various ledger art forms. This particular piece I call Collaborate With Me. So, I do the designing, and then I want the person who buys it to actually paint it. And then we'll both sign our names, right? We all can be ledger artists, right, for the right price. Just kidding. But I thought it was a fun idea. I had done some on paper and just as an experiment, and I was actually pleasantly surprised by the number of people who wanted to be an artist, right? So that SpongeBob piece, I actually had done these are a couple smaller versions. I had done a Patrick starfish piece as well as this SpongeBob piece, and I thought, man, I might be the first Indian to do a square drum. Well, I guess it's not really a square, but it's sort of a squarish drum. And the back was, it was just like this. It was all tied up, and however we tie our drums, right? But I was at the first opening of this Unbound exhibit in Manhattan. They actually opened it in New York City at the NMAI Museum there. As I'm wandering through the exhibit, I see a square drum. It had horns on it and a design on the front, and I was like, holy smokes. And it was actually Sitting Bull's drum. It was one of the drums that he personally used from the 1800s. And I was like, well, I guess I'm not the first, but that's pretty good company. Yeah. This design is an interesting design. It's got some sort of just different design elements than you might typically see. I think I was reading an Art Nouveau book at one point and thought I would adapt that a little bit just to create a little bit of a different design. This particular robe is kind of one of the more contemporary robes that I've done recently. that really explores just some very contemporary narratives. So I'll just kind of go through the spacewalker is actually astronaut Harrington. He was one of the first natives to conduct a spacewalk, and I thought it was pretty incredible. He's probably one of the first natives to not have to die to actually head towards the stars and be out there. So I thought that was pretty significant to see in my lifetime. The black snake is an image that we called some of those pipelines. If you ever went out to some of the protests at KXL or heard about them, that was a commentary. I went out there a couple times to see how I could help and protest, and that particular scene behind that, or in front of that snake, was literally the militarized police force that they had placed there to protect corporate interests. It was amazing to see the response and the efforts. And then I have a couple scenes on there. One on the bottom is a Sundance scene. We build these large brush arbors. We have 4 days, 3 nights of fasting and song, and just you're praying all day long. So I sort of immortalize that. On the top, however, is a bit of a powwow scene with some of my friends, some of my relatives. Again, all those left side of the teepees and the tents and the RVs, and even the outhouses. You can see a couple little outhouses in there. All of that represents how our communities come together just to celebrate our culture, our song and dance. Some whirlwind woman designs. That beadwork in between those two medallions in the middle is a parade scene. I just thought, I've seen parades as kind of an incredible display of art and pageantry and all these really cool things that happen because of fairs and gatherings throughout the country. And so I wanted to immortalize that. And then you see some of the classic images. I always put a bison head at the top and the bison hoof tracks at the bottom, but they're also flanked by stylized teepees. But this particular piece was interesting, and I think on my Instagram page I have a video of it, but that outside is literally L-wire, so in low light it just comes to life. And then I have LEDs behind the beadwork in the middle, so it changes colors and it morphs and glows and backlights, just as an accent to the piece itself. And so it's probably the first of its kind. I can't say I've ever seen another buffalo robe that uses light as part of the medium, but it's a pretty interesting thing. Do we have any questions so far? Maybe I should just pause. We're all good? Okay.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
This is all beaded? It's not painted?
No, this is all painted except for the strip in the middle.
Okay.
The two medallions, and then the parade scene is beadwork. Yeah. Everything else is mostly acrylic paint. A little bit of earth paint in there, but mostly acrylic. Yeah. Okay. And these are, I threw in some of these just so you can kind of see some of the beadwork that I do. These are all 13 cut beads. Pretty classic. The Sasquatch figure in the middle, everybody asked me what kind of hair it is. Like, oh, it's Sasquatch hair. What else? What other hair would it be? And then this particular mask is commentary. There's floral design work has gotten to be pretty in vogue, and we've used it once we got exposure to it in a number of different tribes. But instead of florals, these are actually cross sections and representations of the COVID virus, the Black Plague, and smallpox viruses that have kind of made their way through Indian country at various points. And then I think I've titled it Resiliency or something like that. Resilience, just as a commentary on our ability to adapt and overcome some of these horrific things that we've experienced historically and today as contemporary cultures. I think that might be Oh yeah, that's about the last one. Any other questions? You guys know everything there. You know everything I know about ledger art now, so go forth and share your knowledge with everyone. But I definitely appreciate you guys joining me. I think part of the incredible story of Plains narrative art is that each artist has their own story to tell. Some artists, contemporary artists, will tell you the story of their tribes, of their own personal histories, and unraveling that mystery is pretty exciting. And that's not to say that you won't find that in just Plains ledger art. Each one of these narratives out here is rich in culture and history, and that's one of the great things about shows like this, is you get to interact with the artists themselves and forge these lifelong relationships all around a common love, native art. So thank you for joining me.